bottom 10 of 2012. This is where I'll be counting down my most wretched 10 films of 2012. You know, 2012 has actually been a good year, but it's not been a good year for horror. It's actually been a really despicable year for horror fans. With the exception of movies like Cabin in the Woods, there was hardly anything to watch. The quality of movies this year was just so good though that it was almost hard to pick 10 stinkers. Nah, just kidding. There are always crap movies out there, and I'm gonna list the crappiest ones I've seen all year. First off, I'm gonna start with the movies I've not yet seen. These are movies that have not been released in Sweden yet, so I didn't get a chance to see them. And they include American Mary, Django Unchained, Hitchcock, Jack Reacher, Les Miserables, Red Dawn, Room 237, and Zero Dark 30. Okay, now it's time for some dishonorable mentions. These are movies that I rated 2 stars or less, but that did not make it to the bottom 10 list. And first up, we've got 21 Jump Street. I laughed about once or twice during this movie, and it did have a fun cameo, but overall that was not enough to save it. It was mostly just 2 idiots running around cursing at people for 90 minutes. Not good. And after that, we've got Cosmopolis. This is the new one from David Cronenberg, starring Robert Pattinson. What is Cronenberg up to these days? He was on a really great streak with Viggo Mortensen, and then he goes and does this. This is a long-winded, pretentious waste of a movie, where the dialogue sounds like nails on a chalkboard and it never ends. Next up is The Devil's Carnival. This is the new one from Darren Lynn Bousman, who directed Repo, the Genetic Opera. This movie was just brimming with potential. Everything about this movie was promising. I just found that it felt like a stage play rather than a real musical. Like they put a lot of great talent into a squandered script, and they were all running around on a little stage miming music rather than singing it. What a waste. And then we've got I Am Bruce Lee. It's a new documentary about Bruce Lee, of course, but a very unnecessary one. Do we really need to know how Bruce Lee has inspired the Black Eyed Peas and the world of dancing? I don't think so. And it should come as no surprise that the next one is Liz and Dick. Starring Lindsay Lohan, this is a TV movie about Elizabeth Taylor's marriage to Richard Burton. And the only good thing about this movie is Grant Bowler, who plays Richard Burton. The rest of it is just best avoided. And then we've got Madison County, Another Day, another low-budget slasher movie. The poster says pretend you're somewhere else, and that's probably what you're going to be doing while you're watching this movie. Incredibly low budget, very slow. There isn't a kill for like the first 45 minutes. There are no new ideas, and the actors are pretty horrible. And then we've got Men in Black 3, starring Will Smith again, Tommy Lee Jones again, but this time they've added Josh Brolin as a young Agent K. Even though it has a nice surprise ending, I don't like the world of Men in Black. I don't like the humor of Men in Black. It's just not up my alley, I'm afraid. So that makes this movie pretty much as unbearable as the second one. Unfortunately, Paranorman turned out to be one of the year's biggest disappointments. Here's another movie that I thought had a lot of potential. I loved the first trailers, it looked really charming. Alas, it was nowhere near as charming as Coraline, and when the bad guy in the movie is the most compelling, interesting, and likable character, you've got problems. After that, we've got The Possession, which is kind of like the Jewish take on The Exorcist. And you can pretty much imagine how this one goes down. You've seen it all before. Little girl finds Jewish box, little girl opens Jewish box, demons possess little girl, things turn silly, the end. And then we've got Resident Evil Retribution, goddammit. Another friggin' movie in this series that never seems to end. It's still got Mila Jovovich and she's still wearing tight leather, so we keep watching it. I fell for it again. You probably did too. After that, it's The Woman in Black, starring Daniel Radcliffe, investigating an old house in old times, a creaky manor, and there's literally a scene in this movie where every single horror movie cliche jumps out. It's not scary. Okay, rocking chairs are a little scary, but the rest is not scary. Don't see it. Seriously, don't see it. And I am sorry to announce that my last dishonorable mention is gonna be VHS. Here's another horror movie that had a lot of potential. I heard a lot of great things about it all across the board, and when I watched it, it was just so disjointed. You had all these different found footage short films, and they just didn't really mesh. Some of them were good, some of them were really bad, but all of them were done in a terrible shaky cam. 2 hours of agonizing, terrible, nauseating shaky cam. Sorry, it's just too much. It was worth seeing once though. If these segments had been split up and released online, that would have worked beautifully, but not in one movie. Come on. Okay, those were all my dishonorable mentions. Now let's start counting down the movies. Number 10. Iron Sky. Iron Sky is a movie about space Nazis. An astronaut lands on the moon to discover that the Third Reich has hidden there for a long time and set up a hidden Nazi base. When you watch this movie, for the first 15 minutes or so, you're like, wow, this is really funny, and this is a really good idea. I'm loving this. This is awesome. However, as the movie goes on, you really become aware that this is just another low-budget movie. It does have some charm to it. I like the idea, but the acting is not very good. There's some decent CGI in this movie though, but it doesn't help the thing. It just drags on and on. Had this been a YouTube short film, it would have been tremendous, really great. I would have enjoyed every second of it. But when you take such a thin concept and you stretch it out over 90 minutes, then you really begin to see the holes in the movie. And I'm not just talking about plot holes, I'm talking about the acting, I'm talking about the budget, and the very idea itself. It just becomes tiresome. When you made it through the first hour, you're like, please, just end already. It was a fun idea, but it was not a very good movie. That's why Iron Sky is number 10. Number 9. The Hunger Games. Here's another movie that showed a lot of potential, that had a lot of great stuff going for it, but it was just so incredibly bland. Both as a movie and as an adaptation, I'm afraid this one is a failure. Based on the first novel in the Hunger Games trilogy by Suzanne Collins, it's another movie that's just kind of a Twilight wannabe with very bland actors doing very uninteresting things. And good actors that have been squandered. Case in point, Woody Harrelson. Woody Harrelson could have had a rich character if they would have stuck to the plot in the novel, but they didn't. They mashed it all together. They removed all the interesting parts. Like every single important bit of plot from this movie was just cut out, removed, cut down, watered down, or censored entirely. It's actually a really strong, potent book. It speaks about a lot of very interesting things. Totalitarianism, government control, censorship, class struggles, racial struggles, but most of all, it talks about media control, media violence, media influence. There are so many rich themes that they could have utilized in this movie, but there is literally none of it. Absolutely none of it. It's not even a solid drama. This movie tries to be this really romantic drama, I suppose, but there's just nothing to go on. The actors don't have anything to utilize from the script, and even if they did, they picked the most wooden, boring, plastic, nondescript actors in the whole universe. It's just really sad, and it's just very boring to look at. And then when it's time for some actual action scenes, they shake the camera around like crazy and play music that sounds like it was rejected from a Chinese restaurant. It's like, what the hell is going on here? You can do so much better than that. Even the romance in the novels actually begins as a kind of plot to confuse and play along with the evil regime in this movie, but of course that's never explained or even hinted at in the movie. So ironically, The Hunger Games is one of the biggest disappointments because a book that speaks about the dangers of censorship and manipulation has been censored and manipulated. And number 8. The Bourne Legacy. You know, I really liked the Bourne trilogy. Matt Damon was really good. It had a solid, interesting plot all the way through. It had really marvelous action scenes, and this movie has none of that. I saw this in theaters, and I sat very patiently waiting for this movie to begin to resemble a Bourne movie. It really didn't. The Bourne movies actually had a nice structure to them, you know? They had some of that government blah-de-da, but it was always punctuated by a great action scene. And you always felt the desperation of Bourne as he was running from country to country, trying to figure out who he was and how he was gonna thwart the guys that were after him and regain his life. And in the Bourne Legacy, Jeremy Renner skis, rides a motorcycle, walks around, and there are tons upon tons with scenes of men in suits and ties speaking a lot of gibberish. That's pretty much all you're gonna get. There's about one solid action scene in this movie where he actually fights a couple of people with his extraordinary skills. Then it's over, and there's a lot more talking. A lot more talking, and none of it matters or makes a lick of sense. By the end of it, you're just ready to gouge your freaking eyes out. There's even a motorcycle chase scene in this movie that doesn't involve chasing. They're just riding around on motorcycles. Did they see the first 3 movies? Any of them? Apparently not. I guess they thought this was some kind of juridical drama, some kind of pencil pusher thriller. Oh. And it was a really, really big waste of 2 great talents, especially Jeremy Renner and of course Edward Norton. Edward Norton, did you read this script? Why did you think that this movie was a good idea? I will never know. If you pick up the complete Bourne set, use the 4th movie as a coaster, then watch the first 3 movies instead. They're far better paced, they have an intelligible plot, and they're actually pretty interesting. This one is not. This one's a slow, meandering, pointless exercise in stealing moviegoers' money. Number 7. The Raven. The Raven stars John Cusack as Edgar Allan Poe in a thriller mystery where someone is murdering people using his own stories as inspiration. Of course, he has to help the police officers solve these heinous crimes because he's the only one who can truly outsmart this killer. Well, apparently not, because he doesn't. He runs around screaming like an idiot throughout the entire movie. It's pretty embarrassing. It's kind of like a role that Nicolas Cage rejected and John Cusack picked up out of desperation. Couldn't they have done a modern thriller inspired by Poe? And some kind of Poe expert could come in and help them reference the crimes or something like that? Why did it have to be set in this era? And why did the real Edgar Allan Poe have to be there? It still just feels like a cheap thriller. The kind you rent on a Saturday night when you want Morgan Freeman to chase a sadistic killer because you have nothing better to do. It's a cheap and confused movie with a very terrible and simple plot. And any movie goer with a slight bit of intelligence will be able to foresee who is the killer in this so-called mystery. This is a pointless, strange, and very, very bad thriller. It has very few redeeming features, unless you're really, really hooked by the whodunit genre. The only place I foresee this movie ending up is in the bargain bin. Number 6. The Dictator. You know, I think Sacha Baron Cohen is really a funny man. He's proved it already. Borat was very funny, and Bruno was outright hysterical. I laughed my ass off to that movie. For every scene in that movie, I laughed harder and harder and harder until the ending, where I was on the floor laughing. I was damn near institutionalized when I watched that movie. But now he's back with The Dictator. It does not work. It doesn't work on any level, this movie. The funny thing about his earlier work was not always what he was doing or what he was saying. It was more about people's reaction to what he was doing or what he was saying. In this one, you don't get a lot of that. Since it's meant to be kind of a serious movie, kind of like a serious feature film this time, they didn't just point the camera and let him rip. It doesn't hold together. The script is awful. It's absolutely terrible. In this movie, it goes around with shocking lowbrow jokes that even South Park fans would find degrading and insulting. I think he actually insults just about every possible human being in this movie. There is no end to how low he will go, how low he will steep in the name of comedy. And I'm not going to give you any examples because the movie is just that terrible. It's best left forgotten, and I've pretty much already forgotten it. Perhaps you'll laugh once during the running time because the damn thing is just so frickin' bizarre. But it's not what was intended. It's not the hysterical movie it should be. Just offensive, dumb, and pointless. And that's the best compliment I can pay to this movie. At number 5. Intruders. Okay, I may get keelhauled for this one because I thought The Tall Man, starring Jessica Biel, was a really great movie and it came out this year. And you can say that these two movies do have a lot in common. But whereas The Tall Man felt more like M. Night Shyamalan when he was in his prime, Intruders feels more kind of like a special ABC greeting. It's that kind of movie where you feel like you're just being twisted and manipulated and you're expecting a solid thriller, but that is not what you're getting. I think it's going to be a scary movie, well, you're wrong. You think the actors are going to be compelling? Well, they're not. You think that the story is going to be gripping and interesting? It isn't. Just that typical, I like to call it, my child has a secret friend genre, where there's something spooky going on in the house, but it just ends up being a heavy-handed, frustrating movie that ultimately becomes more silly than frightening. And it certainly doesn't help that a plot that is already so convoluted is told in 2 different languages. Doesn't help Clive Owen's career, I'll tell you that much. The movie's about 2 children in 2 different countries who are visited by an evil boogeyman without a face who wants to come claim them. That sounds kind of like a spooky movie, you'd think. I can't spoil it, but I'll just say that what ends up happening is not only disappointing, it's outright frustrating. Feels like you're being hammered across the head with a mallet, and a waste of what might be a perfectly good thriller. Number 4. We need to talk about Kevin. Here's a movie that I can only describe as difficult. This movie is just difficult to watch. There's just nothing about it to enjoy. There's just no entertainment value to this movie. The movie's about a mother played by Tilda Swinton who becomes the mother of a boy named Kevin. From the moment that Kevin is born, he's a difficult child. He hates his mother, and I truly mean hates her. He's a sociopath. For every step she makes towards helping and loving her son, he ruins it. He hurts his mother physically and verbally. He insults her. He uses foul language against her. And of course, he puts up a great charade for his father, so he'll never know what he's done against his mother. You have to have more patience than the characters in this movie while you're watching it. I just don't see the point of this movie, literally. I've seen a lot of tough movies, you know? I've seen a lot of movies where the subject matter is tough. I've seen a lot of movies that are strong and violent. I've seen a lot of movies that deal with dark psychological issues. But rarely have I seen a movie where I literally cannot see the point of watching it. I don't see any redeeming features to this movie. It's just annoying. It's depressing. Tilda Swinton does do a pretty good job in this movie, admittedly, but we're enduring the hell alongside with her, and it's just like, when is this going to end? When is this noisy, loud, annoying, disturbing, worrisome movie ever going to end? I've seen movies about sociopaths, and I've seen plenty of movies about psychopaths, but they all seem to have a point. They all seem to have a plot that went somewhere. They all made you think, but they all gave you something. They all sort of rewarded you. That's what's called entertainment. And this movie just doesn't have any entertainment value whatsoever. It's almost like an experiment, like a sadistic experiment, like the filmmakers wanted us to just endure this torture and see how we would react. Of course, families should be speaking out if they feel that their child is in need, if they have a special child that's doing worrisome and disturbing things and not acting nicely. But did you really have to make a movie to prove that point? Because that's the only message I can get from this movie. And it's one of few movies I've seen that might actually push a disturbed mind over the edge. It's actually so troublesome, so annoying, and so difficult to watch that I can't recommend this to anybody. It's just a disturbing, tough, pretentious piece of garbage, and I don't see why it exists. But perhaps that's just me, I don't know. Alright, number 3. Now we're getting to the major leagues. Here are some truly, truly abysmal movies. And number 3 is Ghost Rider, Spirit of Vengeance. That's right, Nicolas Cage is back as the Ghost Rider, Johnny Blaze. And I actually thought for a second, naive as I was, that this movie might be better than the last one. The last one was a bad movie, I'll say that much. It just didn't work. Nicolas Cage should not have been playing the Ghost Rider, and it was a seriously cheesy movie. But this one manages to be even crappier, so much crappier. It's one of those movies that you watch and you think, just what the hell is going on here? How is this possible? Can a movie really be this bad? Did they really cast Nicolas Cage, promise us that this movie would be better than the first one, and then it goes like this? But indeed it does. And what's even more annoying about this movie, it almost has potential on some level. Ghost Rider's a great character, he looks great, he's really awesome, he kicks a lot of ass, and the action scenes are actually pretty well made. It's got some pretty epic CGI, this movie. There's some great shots of him nuking cars and destroying people with fire and I don't know what else, but the script, the acting is just so deplorable. And it feels like a 12-year-old shot this movie with just too much money. You're just awestruck by what's going on in this movie because it's just so dumb, it's just so strange, and it's just so Cage. I don't know what the hell that man is smoking. You can just tell something's not right with him. He can't be a serious actor anymore, can he? Somewhere during the late 90s, early 2000s, he just started gradually going insane, and now people are too afraid to tell him, and they're just pointing the camera at him anyway and giving him money for terrible movies. And we have to be the ones to endure them. Don't give your money to this movie. Support good superhero movies, because we had a lot of good, even great superhero movies this year. Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance is an abysmal, embarrassing, awful, childish, horrid movie, and it should not have been watched, let alone made. The movie seriously derails even from the opening titles, and there's just no going back. There's no rescuing this movie at all. It's just train wreck after train wreck, and I'm not sure when, if ever, that Nicolas Cage is gonna regain his sanity. Good luck. And the second worst movie of 2012 is The Devil Inside. Every single year we get a lot of possession movies, we get a lot of exorcism movies, and this one is probably one of the very worst ever made. It's probably one of the worst horror movies and one of the worst movies ever made. When a woman travels to the Vatican in order to find a cure for her sick mother, she looks to priests and psychologists to perform an exorcism on her and drive out a demon. The first thing you'll notice about this movie is that all the actors, all of them, look so incredibly bored throughout this movie. Probably weren't paid enough money, so they were just like, what the hell, we'll just get this thing over with. I'm not gonna bother trying to act convincingly. It's not gonna be a scary movie, so I'm just gonna stand around here and deliver my lines and get my scenes over with. And that'll be that, then I'll just go home. There's absolutely nothing about this movie that is even remotely frightening. And I do mean nothing. Absolutely nothing. Do you find it frightening when people yell into your ear like a baboon? I didn't think so. Then you're probably not gonna find this movie very scary either. They're just tossing the camera around like a broken baseball, staring into the camera like half-dead sheep, reciting their lines with the least amount of conviction, collecting their paychecks, and going home ashamed of this movie. And they should be ashamed of this movie. The director, the people involved in making this movie, the scriptwriter, the actors, they should all be ashamed for making a movie as bad as this one. To add insult to injury, when the goddamn thing is almost over and you're ready to go home, you're waiting for some kind of resolution, an ending. Give us an ending, please, so I can just go home. That's when the movie cuts to a website. That's right, it cuts to a URL that you can go visit to get your answers. Ooh, spooky. No, that's not spooky, that's fucking insulting. This movie's just a deplorable, sickening, stupid waste of time, and I deeply regret even trying to watch it. It's an insult to horror movies, it's an insult to movies, it's an insult to actors, and it's an insult to moviegoers. That's how bad this movie is, and that's about all I have to say about that movie. If you have not endured this horrible piece of crap already, don't do it. Don't do it on a bet. Don't do it for free. Don't do it if you're bored. Don't do it if you're a horror fan. Don't watch it. It's not worth anybody's time. And that is all I have to say about The Devil Inside. And number 1, the absolute worst movie of 2012 is Piranha 3DD. This movie made a lot of shit lists this year, and it's no coincidence. I've seen a lot of lists already where people have named this the worst movie of 2012. And trust me, I had named this movie the worst movie a long time ago, before I had seen a single top 10 list. There are truly few movies that are so dumb that they can't even be a stupid horror movie, but this one succeeds. In the first scene of this movie, Gary Busey lights a dead cow's fart on fire, and then it gets bad. When David Hasselhoff is running around with his floppy stomach, acting as the Baywatch lifeguard to protect a bunch of dead double D bimbos, then you're in trouble. You know, the first Piranha 3D actually annoyed me too. I didn't like how much attention that movie was getting. I like stupid, degrading horror flicks. The director of that movie had already made some pretty extraordinary movies. He'd already made High Tension and the fantastic remake of The Hills Have Eyes. And then he went and made Piranha 3D. And I was like, what the hell are you doing, man? You're capable of so fantastic movies. Why are you degrading yourself this way? But now, having seen this sequel, I get it. I get it. I fully get it. That first one is actually a nice nod to horror movies. It's got buckets of blood, it's got horrible monsters, it's got naked women. Just a fun, dumb popcorn movie. Horror movie you won't waste any brain cells on, so to speak. But this one, it's just so goddamn bad. The filmmakers had no idea what the hell they were doing. It's as if a 16-year-old boy was drunk off his ass and had the idea of shooting a movie. That's about how bad this movie is. When you've got piranha swimming up people's urethras, I've seen short films by 10-year-olds on YouTube that are more cohesive than this movie. I've seen more enjoyable characters, I've seen better plots, I've seen it all. Why do actors like Danielle Panabaker and Christopher Lloyd degrade themselves by starring in this piece of trash? It's just an utterly perplexing movie, and I will never, ever understand how someone can mistake this for a watchable, entertaining movie. Piranha 3DD, you've gone and done it. You are the worst piece of shit that was ever released in 2012. Congratulations. Well, that was cathartic. Thanks for watching. But stick around, because shortly I will be listing the top 10 movies of 2012, including my honorable mentions and the movies I'm most looking forward to in 2013. Thanks for watching and listening to me spew over these horrible movies. See you in the next one. Bye.